My parents claimed a blizzard grounded their flight, leaving me standing alone at my graduation. Yet there they were on the 85-inch screen at the sports bar, screaming in VIP seats at the Super Bowl with painted faces. As I stared in disbelief, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother demanding $50,000 for emergency heart surgery. They think I am still their naive daughter, but they forget that my degree is in forensic audit, and my first investigation is them. My name is Olivia, and at 29 years old, I stood alone in the center of the University of Chicago quad. The wind whipped against my master's gown, but the chill I felt had nothing to do with the weather. Around me, the air was thick with laughter and the popping of champagne corks as families embraced their graduates. Fathers were adjusting tassels, and mothers were weeping with pride. I tightened my grip on the leather folder containing my degree, the leather digging into my palm. My parents were not here. An hour ago, my mother had called to say a freak blizzard had grounded their flight out of Seattle. I had checked the weather report, which showed clear skies, but I wanted to believe them. I needed to believe them. My phone vibrated in the pocket of my robe. It was a text from my mother, Linda. I opened it to find a blurry, low-light photograph of my father, Richard, lying on a beige bed that looked vaguely medical. The caption read that his heart was failing again and that the stress of their financial ruin had triggered a massive attack. She said he might not make it through the night. I felt a wave of nausea, so I retreated to a sports bar just off campus to escape the happy families and process the news. The place was packed for Super Bowl Sunday. The noise was deafening, a roar of cheers and jeers that made my head spin. I ordered a whiskey neat and stared up at the 85-inch television screen mounted above the bar. The camera panned across the crowd, zooming in on the VIP section. My breath hitched in my throat. There they were. It was unmistakable. My father was not in a hospital bed. He was standing in a luxury box seat, his face painted in the team colors, holding a beer high in the air. My mother was next to him, laughing hysterically, and beside her was Brad, my younger brother. They were not suffering in a blizzard. They were sitting in seats that cost $5,000 each, screaming their lungs out on national television while I sat alone with my degree. The betrayal hit me with the force of a physical blow. For 2 years, I had worked 3 jobs while completing my Master of Forensic Audit, eating instant noodles and skipping heating bills just to make them proud. I had believed their lies about being broke. I had believed every excuse. Then came the second vibration. Another text from Linda. If you do not send $50,000 from your savings right now, your father is going to die. This surgery requires a deposit. Do not be selfish. Olivia, if he dies, it is your fault. I stared at the message, and then back at the TV where my dying father was currently high-fiving a stranger. Memories flooded back. I had always been the scapegoat, the one who had to leave home at 18 and fend for herself. Brad was the golden child who wrecked cars and failed classes, yet was treated like a prince. They had missed my high school graduation for Brad's Little League game. Now, they had missed my master's graduation for a football game. I picked up my phone and dialed home. I forced my voice to tremble, summoning every ounce of fake panic I could muster. Mom, I just got your text, I stammered, ensuring my voice cracked at the right moment. Is he okay? I'm so scared. He is fading fast. Olivia. My mother lied, her voice smooth and practiced. We are at the county hospital. They will not operate without the money. I will handle it. I sobbed into the receiver. I need to move some funds around. It might take 24 hours to clear. Please tell Dad to hold on. I hung up before she could push further. My tears dried instantly, replaced by a cold, calculating rage. I did not transfer a single cent. Instead, I opened the airline app and booked a one-way ticket to Seattle departing in 3 hours. I opened my laptop right there on the sticky bar table. I logged into the remote server of Argus Financial, the firm where I had just secured a position as a senior auditor. I had access to premium credit tracing tools that the general public did not. I punched in my father's social security number. The report generated in seconds, and the results made my blood run cold. They were not poor. They had churned through hundreds of thousands of dollars in online casinos and luxury goods over the last 6 months. But the most damning detail was at the bottom of the page in red text. Their house, the family home I grew up in, was not just mortgaged, it was in active foreclosure. They had 30 days to vacate before the bank seized the property. They did not need $50,000 for surgery. They needed it to save their own skins, and they were willing to fake a heart attack to steal it from me. The heavy Seattle mist clung to the windshield of my rental car as I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home. It was barely 6 a.m, and the suburban silence was absolute. I killed the engine and stared at the house that loomed before me. It was a sprawling structure, far too large for 3 people, but it was the object parked directly in front of the garage that made my jaw tighten. A brand new Porsche 911 sat there, its polished black paint gleaming under the streetlights. It was a vehicle that cost more than my entire student loan debt. They claimed they had no money for surgery, yet my brother apparently needed a race car. I bypassed the front door and went around the side to the mudroom entrance. I retrieved the spare key from inside a fake decorative rock I had placed there years ago. I prayed they had not changed the locks. The key turned with a stiff click, and I slipped inside, moving with the silent tread I had perfected during my years of trying to be invisible in this house. The air inside smelled of stale alcohol and expensive cologne. I crept into the hallway and peered into the living room. It looked like a fraternity house after a rager. Empty bottles of Dom Perignon and Cristal littered the coffee table, alongside half-eaten trays of gourmet catering, but the most damning evidence lay carelessly tossed on the side table. They were ticket stubs. 3 VIP passes for the Super Bowl, along with boarding passes for business-class seats on a flight that had returned only 4 hours ago. My father, Richard, was not in the ICU. He was sprawled on the leather recliner, still wearing his jersey, watching a replay of the game. He held a fresh beer in one hand and his phone in the other. Yeah, it was insane, Mike. He boomed into the phone, his voice thick with pride and alcohol. Best $10,000 I ever spent. You should have seen the view. We were practically on the field. Life is good, pal. Life is good. I felt a coldness settle in my chest that had nothing to do with the damp morning air. I quietly backed away and slipped up the rear staircase to the second floor. I needed to secure my position before I made my presence known. I entered my old bedroom, but it was unrecognizable. My bed and desk were gone, replaced by racks of designer coats and stacks of shoeboxes. My mother had turned my sanctuary into her walk-in closet. I worked quickly. I pulled 2 miniature cameras and a set of high-sensitivity microphones from my bag. I hid one device behind a stack of hatboxes near the door that opened to the hallway, and I slipped back downstairs to plant another under the kitchen island counter. Once the trap was set, I went to the front door, opened it, and slammed it shut loud enough to shake the frame. "Mom, Dad," I screamed, injecting a frantic tremor into my voice. "I got here as fast as I could. Is he okay?" The reaction was instantaneous and almost impressive in its speed. By the time I ran into the living room, Richard had thrown his beer behind the sofa and was clutching his chest, his face contorted in faux agony. Linda, my mother, swept the ticket stubs into her pocket with a sleight of hand that would make a magician jealous. Olivia Linda cried out, rushing to hug me, though her eyes darted nervously to the mess on the table. "Oh, thank God you are here. Your father. It has been a terrible night. He is in so much pain." "I thought I was going to die," Richard groaned, adding a weak cough for effect. "My heart, it feels like it is exploding." I rushed to his side, holding his hand, feeling the calluses of a man who played golf every weekend, not one who worked. "I am here now." Dad, I will take care of everything. Just then, heavy footsteps thudded down the stairs. Brad appeared, wearing a silk robe that likely cost $500. He looked at me with a sneer, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Finally. Brad spat. You took long enough. Dad has been suffering while you were probably sleeping. Do you have the credit card I need to go pick up his heart medication at the pharmacy? It is not covered by insurance. I knew exactly what kind of medication cost that much and was sold at the electronics store he frequented. I do, I said, looking down at my shoes to hide the disgust in my eyes. But I cannot transfer the $50,000 immediately. My savings are in a fixed-term deposit account. I have to go to the bank in person to break the contract. It will take 3 days for the funds to clear. The room went silent. I saw Linda and Richard exchange a sharp, worried glance. They needed the cash now, likely to cover the gambling debts I had seen in their credit report. 3 days, Linda asked, her voice sharpening slightly before softening back into the grieving wife persona. Well, I suppose we can ask the hospital to wait, if you sign a guarantee. I will sign whatever you need. I promised. I will stay here and take care of Dad until the money comes through. They relaxed, the tension leaving their shoulders. They believed they had won. They thought they had their dutiful, foolish daughter back in the cage. That night, after the house finally fell silent, I sat on the floor of the guest room with my specialized laptop. The walls were thin, and I could hear Brad snoring down the hall. I pulled up the network scanner. My father had never been good with technology. The Wi-Fi password was still his birthday. I bypassed the weak firewall in seconds and gained remote access to the desktop computer in the study. I began the transfer. Every email, every bank statement, every deleted chat log flowed from their hard drive to mine. The progress bar moved steadily across the screen, a green line measuring the depth of their betrayal. I watched the file names scroll by offshore accounts, betting slips, mortgage notices. I was not just a daughter visiting her sick father anymore. I was an auditor conducting a raid, and they were the targets. The blue light of my laptop screen illuminated the dark guest room as I sifted through the digital wreckage of my parents' financial lives. The data told a story far more grotesque than simple irresponsibility. It was a chronicle of malice. I discovered they had taken out a third mortgage on the house, not for medical bills or repairs, but to fuel a chaotic spree of high-stakes sports betting and to purchase the Porsche sitting in the driveway. They were drowning in debt simply because they refused to live within their means, desperate to maintain a facade of wealth for neighbors who likely did not care. Then I found the emails. They were exchanging messages with a lawyer named Saul, a man whose reputation for unethical practices was well known in the county. The subject line read, Asset Transfer Strategy. They were not asking for help with bankruptcy. They were strategizing on how to trick me into signing a document they claimed was a medical power of attorney, which was actually a guarantor agreement making me personally liable for their debts. They were actively plotting to shackle me to their financial sinking ship. I put on my headphones and tuned into the live feed from the camera I had planted in the kitchen. Linda and Brad were sitting at the island, eating a late-night snack. Do not worry about her, Linda said, her voice dripping with disdain as she poured wine into a glass. Your sister is stupid when it comes to family. She is so starved for affection. I just have to tell her I am proud of her, and she will vomit cash. It works every time. It better. Brad laughed, his mouth full of food. I need gas money for the Porsche. Then Richard's voice drifted in from the living room. And stop worrying about that graduation nonsense. That degree is just paper trash. I made more on the coin toss prop bet at the Super Bowl than she will make in a year. Hearing those words did something to me. The lingering ache of the little girl who just wanted her parents to love her finally evaporated. It was replaced by a sterile, forensic detachment. I realized then that I was not their daughter. I was their prey. They were parasites, and I was simply the host they intended to bleed dry. The next morning, I initiated the next phase of my counterattack. I dug a crumpled, urgent notice from the bank out of the recycling bin, one that threatened immediate foreclosure. I walked into the kitchen where Linda was brewing coffee, my eyes wide with feigned confusion. "Mom," I asked, holding up the paper with trembling hands. "I found this in the trash. It says you owe $300,000 and the house is being seized. Is this true?" Linda did not even flinch. She set down her mug and sighed. "Wearing the mask of a martyr. Oh, Olivia, we did not want to burden you. That debt. Well, a lot of it is from raising you. Private tutors, your braces, the extra food. We took loans to give you a good life, and the interest just piled up. We sacrificed our future for yours. It was a lie so bold it was almost breathtaking. I had attended public school. I had worked at a diner since I was 15 years old to pay for my own clothes and textbooks. I had paid my own way through college and graduate school without taking a dime from them. Brad, who was leaning against the counter, scoffed. "Seriously, Olivia, you work at a big firm now. You make 6 figures. Are you really going to be stingy about a few bucks when Mom and Dad gave up everything for you? You are so selfish." I forced tears into my eyes, letting my shoulders slump in defeat. I didn't know. I sobbed, dropping my head. "I am so sorry. I caused this. I have to fix it." I looked up at them, my face wet with fake tears. "I will sell my condo in Chicago. It is fully paid off. It should cover the mortgage and Dad's surgery expenses. I can sell it this week." The transformation in the room was instantaneous. The tension vanished, replaced by a greedy, electric excitement. "You would do that?" Linda asked, her eyes gleaming as she calculated the windfall. "Oh, honey, that is the right thing to do. That is what family does." From the living room, Richard suddenly appeared. The man who had been at death's door the previous night was now walking upright, a spring in his step. "That settles it then," he declared, rubbing his hands together. "We can clear the debts and maybe look at booking a vacation to recover from all this stress. I saw a great deal on a cruise to the Mediterranean." They smiled at me, thinking they had won the lottery. They had no idea that I was not selling my home to save them. I was simply buying time to ensure their destruction was absolute. The game of cat and mouse began the next morning over a breakfast of cold toast and tension. I placed a thick stack of legal documents on the kitchen table, smoothing the paper with deliberate care. I told my parents that in order to liquidate my retirement accounts early to pay for the surgery, the insurance company required a notarized affidavit from them. I explained that the document simply confirmed they were of sound mind, physically capable of making financial decisions, and fully aware of the transaction. In reality, it was a binding declaration of competency. By signing it, they were stripping away any future defense of senility or duress when the legal hammer finally fell. They signed it without reading a single line, their eyes only seeing the invisible pile of cash waiting at the end of the ink trail. To celebrate, I took them to the most expensive steakhouse in downtown Seattle. I had orchestrated the seating arrangement perfectly. 2 tables away, obscured by a large fern but within earshot, sat Marcus, the loan shark my father owed money to. I had anonymously tipped him off that Richard Vance would be dining there. I watched Marcus stiffen as we sat down, but he held his position as I had predicted. Midway through the meal, I raised my voice just enough to carry across the room. "It is a relief I can help," I said, beaming with a fake smile. "Especially since my firm just approved my performance bonus. $200,000 should be hitting my account next week." The effect was electric. Richard choked on his wine, and Linda's eyes widened, losing all focus on her dying husband. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. 200,000. Oh, Olivia, that is wonderful. You know, since you have that coming in, we should talk about Brad, his car. It is a death trap. The brakes are shot. It is not safe for him to drive to job interviews. He needs something reliable. Maybe a Range Rover. I glanced out the window where Brad's brand new Porsche was currently being valet parked. The audacity was breathtaking. She was lying about his safety to squeeze a luxury SUV out of me. Of course, I said, sipping my water. Safety is a priority. Brad, why don't you drive me to my lawyer's office after this? We can start the paperwork for the money. And on the way, we can discuss cars. Brad agreed, eager to secure his new toy. Once we were in the car, his Porsche, which smelled of fresh leather and arrogance, I activated the recorder in my purse. I employed a standard forensic interview technique known as sympathetic validation. You are a great driver, Brad, I said softly as he weaved through traffic. Mom worries too much. It is not like that accident last year was your fault. I know you had a rough time with that. Brad snorted, his ego instantly baited. Exactly. That guy came out of nowhere. It was total bad luck, but Mom and Dad freaked out. They drained their retirement account to pay off the cops and that witness. 50 grand just to make it go away. Can you believe that they act like I am a criminal? That was smart of them, I soothed, my heart pounding as the confession recorded clearly. You cannot let one mistake ruin your future. Right. Anyway, about the Range Rover, he continued, oblivious that he had just admitted to a hit and run and bribery. When we returned to the house, I walked upstairs to find my suitcase unzipped and overturned on the bed. My clothes were scattered, and the lining of the bag had been torn open. Linda was standing there, panting slightly, having clearly just finished ransacking my belongings looking for cash or checks. I did not scream. I did not get angry. I simply reached into my purse and pulled out a shiny, silver credit card. It was a prepaid card I had bought at a drugstore with a limit of exactly $50. Mom, I said, my voice full of hurt. You did not have to search. If you needed money for groceries or things, you just had to ask. Here. I handed her the card. This is my emergency platinum card. The limit is very high. Go buy yourself something nice for the party tomorrow. You deserve it. Linda snatched the card from my hand, her guilt instantly replaced by greed. She mumbled a quick excuse about looking for laundry and practically ran out of the room. She was heading straight to the mall to max out a card that would decline after the first pair of socks. And I smiled as I began to fold my clothes. The trap was not just set. It was snapping shut. The phone in my pocket vibrated violently, shattering the silence of the afternoon. It was Linda. I answered, pulling the phone away from my ear as her shrieking voice pierced the speaker. She was hysterical. She was standing at the counter of Louis Vuitton with 3 of her wealthy friends, and the prepaid card I had given her had just been declined for a $3,000 handbag. She was humiliated. How could you do this to me? She screamed, her voice cracking with rage. The cashier cut the card. My friends are laughing at me. You said it was platinum. Calm down, Mom, I said, my voice steady and soothing. It is a security feature. The bank flagged the transaction because it is outside your usual spending pattern. I just sent a verification link to your phone. You need to click it and sign the digital waiver to prove it is really you. Once you sign, the funds will unlock instantly. Fix it, she yelled and hung up. A moment later, a notification pinged on my laptop. She had clicked the link. She thought she was authorizing a credit card, but she had just installed a rootkit logger on her phone. I now had her precise GPS location and a mirror of every text message and call she made. I watched the screen as she frantically tried the card again, unaware that I had total oversight of her digital life. While Linda was busy trying to salvage her reputation at the mall, Richard was at home, his greed battling his paranoia. I watched via the hidden camera in the study as he picked up the landline. He dialed the main number for Argus Financial. He was checking my story. He wanted to know if I was truly worth the trouble. I had anticipated this. The number he dialed did not go to the main switchboard in Chicago. It redirected to a burner phone sitting on the desk of Sarah, My closest friend and a fellow auditor who was in on the operation. Argus Financial Executive HR. Sarah answered in her most professional voice. Yes, I am calling to verify employment for an Olivia Vance, Richard asked, his voice trembling slightly. One moment, Sarah said, typing on a keyboard for effect. Yes, Vice President Vance. She is one of our top earners. Her base salary is $300,000, excluding bonuses. Is there an issue with her employment verification? No issue, Richard stammered, his face flushing red with excitement. Vice President. Wow, thank you. He hung up, grinning like a wolf. He was not just looking at a daughter anymore. He was looking at a retirement plan. The celebration was cut short by a heavy pounding on the front door. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. I saw Richard freeze on the camera feed. He knew that knock. I walked to the front door and opened it. Standing on the porch was Marcus, a man whose tailored suit did nothing to hide the violence in his eyes. He had 2 associates behind him. Richard Vance lives here, Marcus said, his voice a low rumble. He owes me money, and I hear his rich daughter is in town. I am Olivia, I said, stepping out onto the porch and closing the door behind me to block my father's view. I did not flinch. And you are trespassing. I am a forensic auditor. Marcus, I know how to document harassment, extortion, and usury. If you step 1 foot inside this house, I will have the FBI freezing your assets before you can blink. Marcus stepped closer, looming over me. I want my money. I leaned in, dropping my voice to a whisper so only he could hear. And you will get it. But not today. Tomorrow night. My parents are hosting a party. I am handing over a check for $200,000. If you want to get paid, you will come tomorrow at 8 o'clock. You can take the money in front of everyone. It will be cleaner that way. Marcus studied my face, searching for a lie. He found none. If this is a game, he hissed, I will burn this house down with you inside it. See you at 8, I said coldly. He signaled his men, and they retreated to their black SUV. I took a breath, composed myself, and went back inside. I found Richard cowering in the kitchen. Who was that? He asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. Just a delivery driver with the wrong address. I lied effortlessly. But listen, Dad, I have been thinking, since I am leaving soon, and the bonus money is coming. I want to host a farewell party tomorrow night. I want to give you the check for $200,000 in front of all your friends. I want everyone to know that the Vance family is back on top. Richard's fear evaporated instantly. A party. Yes, that is brilliant. We can invite the neighbors, the club members, everyone who doubted us. They spent the rest of the evening making phone calls, inviting every person they had ever tried to impress. They were setting the stage for their greatest triumph. They had no idea they were building the audience for their own execution. The delivery truck arrived at noon, unloading a cinema-grade laser projector and a massive outdoor screen that took up nearly half of the backyard. My parents watched from the patio with glasses of wine in their hands, their faces glowing with anticipation. I told them I wanted to project a montage of family memories as a backdrop for the check presentation. They thought it was a touching tribute to their parenting. They did not realize they were watching the construction of their own scaffold. I spent the afternoon drafting a document titled Deed of Gift. To the untrained eye, it looked like a standard agreement transferring $200,000 to Richard and Linda Vance. However, hidden within the dense legalese of Section 4, Paragraph 3, was a clause I knew they would never read. It stated that the recipients acknowledged the funds were being used solely to satisfy debts incurred through illegal sports gambling, and that they admitted to fabricating medical emergencies to solicit said funds. Signing this document would be a formal, notarized confession admissible in court. Brad, naturally, wanted his share of the glory. He barged into my room demanding a new suit for the party, claiming he needed to look the part of a wealthy heir. I smiled and agreed, driving him to the most exclusive tailor in downtown Seattle. He picked out a charcoal suit made of Italian wool that cost $3,000. When we reached the register, I opened my purse and gasped, feigning shock. "Oh no," I said, checking my pockets. I must have left my wallet in the other bag. "Brad, just put it on the store credit line. I will pay it off tomorrow with the bonus money." He hesitated for only a second before his vanity took over. He signed the high-interest credit agreement with a flourish, adding yet another debt to his name that I had absolutely no intention of paying, while Brad was admiring himself in the mirror. I stepped outside and made the call that would seal their fate. I contacted the local police department's fraud division and the special investigative unit of the insurance company. I provided them with the digital trail I had uncovered, the forged medical records, the flight logs proving Richard was in a stadium when he claimed to be in cardiac arrest, and the emails coordinating the scam. I told them to be ready. Back at the house, I practiced extreme digital hygiene. I copied every terabyte of evidence onto 3 separate encrypted hard drives. One went into my locked briefcase, one went into the ventilation shaft of the rental car, and the third I taped to the underside of the neighbor's mailbox. I also uploaded a cloud backup set to auto-release to the district attorney's inbox if I did not enter a safety code every 24 hours. That night, the house was quiet. I sat on the floor of the guest room, holding my master's degree. For the first time in years, the crushing weight on my chest began to lift. I was not just fighting back. I was surgically removing a tumor that had been killing me slowly since childhood. The door creaked open. It was Linda. She sat on the edge of the bed and picked up a hairbrush, motioning for me to sit in front of her like I was 5 years old again. I complied, feeling the bristles against my scalp. "I am so proud of you, Olivia," she cooed, her voice sickly sweet. "I knew you would come through. You are the strong one, Brad. Well, he is still finding his way. You have to promise me you will always look after him. He needs his big sister. She was grooming me. She was ensuring that even after they were gone, I would remain a servant to her golden son." I looked at her reflection in the dark window. "Mom," I asked quietly, "on the day of my graduation, where were you really?" Linda did not even pause. She did not stumble. She looked me right in the eyes and lied with the ease of breathing. "I told you, honey. I was at the hospital holding your father's hand. It was the scariest night of my life. I wished I could have been there with you." That lie was the final drop of fuel on the fire. Any lingering hesitation, any small shred of guilt about what I was about to do, evaporated instantly. There was no love here. There was only manipulation. I waited until she left the room. Then, I picked up my phone and sent 2 identical text messages, one to Marcus, the loan shark, the other to the lead detective on the fraud case. 8 o'clock tomorrow evening. Do not be late. The sun began to set over the manicured lawns of my parents' estate, painting the sky in hues of violet and bruised orange. The backyard had been transformed into a spectacle of excess. Strings of Edison bulbs crisscrossed above the patio, casting a warm, flattering glow over the rented white linens and the crystal glassware. Waiters in stiff tuxedos circulated with silver trays of hors d'oeuvres, offering lobster tails and caviar blinnies to guests who had no idea they were eating on credit. The air smelled of expensive perfume, roasted lamb, and the distinct metallic tang of desperation. Richard and Linda were in their element. They moved through the crowd like royalty, clinking glasses and accepting congratulations for a success that was not theirs. I watched from the edge of the patio as my father gripped the shoulder of a neighbor, laughing loudly. "Yes, Olivia is doing incredibly well." I heard him boast, his voice booming. "Vice president at Argus Financial. She insisted on doing this for us. She is such a devoted girl. She is practically handing us a blank check tonight." Linda was right beside him, playing the role of the doting mother to perfection. She wiped a non-existent tear from her eye as she told the president of the Homeowners Association about my sacrifice to come home and care for her ailing husband. It was a masterclass in deception. They believed the lie so fully that they had forgotten the truth themselves. Brad was near the open bar, already swaying on his feet. He was surrounded by a group of his sycophant friends, holding a tumbler of scotch that was likely older than he was. "Yeah, the Range Rover is practically a done deal," Brad slurred, gesturing wildly. "My sister is buying it for me tomorrow. She knows I need reliable transport. Honestly, she is just lucky we let her back into the family. She is like my personal ATM now." His friends laughed, and I felt a cold smile touch my lips. I stood alone in the shadows of a large oak tree, wearing a simple, sharp black dress that contrasted with the floral pastels of the other guests. I held a glass of red wine, but I did not drink. I needed my senses sharp. I was not a guest at this party. I was the executioner. At 8 o'clock sharp, the tone of the evening shifted. A black sedan pulled up the driveway, and 3 men stepped out. Marcus walked in front. He had traded his leather jacket for a dark suit, allowing him to blend in with the crowd, but his predator's gait was unmistakable. He caught my eye across the lawn and gave a subtle nod. He and his men dispersed, mingling near the exits. A silent perimeter of muscle and threat. They were the Hammer. Beyond the hedges, invisible to the partygoers but clear to me, sat 2 unmarked sedans. The detectives from the fraud division and the insurance investigators were waiting for my signal. They were the Anvil. Richard tapped a spoon against his champagne glass, the sharp ringing sound cutting through the chatter. "If I could have everyone's attention, please," he shouted, beaming. The crowd quieted, turning their faces toward the makeshift stage we had set up near the garden fountain. Tonight is a special night. My daughter, Olivia, has returned home to support her family in a time of crisis. She has a special presentation for us. Olivia, darling, come up here." The applause was polite but enthusiastic. I set my wine glass down on a passing tray and walked toward the stage. My heels clicked rhythmically on the stone pavers, a countdown to destruction. I stepped up onto the platform, taking the microphone from my father's sweaty hand. He whispered in my ear, "Make it good, honey. Don't forget the check." I looked out at the sea of expectant faces. I saw Linda beaming with greed. I saw Brad smirking with entitlement. I saw Marcus watching with arms crossed. "Thank you all for coming," I said, my voice steady and amplified across the silent garden. "My parents told you I came back to give them a gift, and they are right, but money is temporary. I wanted to give them something that lasts forever. I wanted to give them the truth." I turned slightly and nodded to the technician I had hired, a young man who had no allegiance to my family. "Hit it," I said. The massive screen behind me, which had been displaying a pleasant, looping video of a sunset, suddenly went black. The music cut out abruptly. A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. Then, the projector hummed to life, beaming a beam of pure white light. In massive, jagged red letters that seemed to bleed down the screen, the title of my presentation appeared, freezing the breath in everyone's lungs. "The Truth About Graduation Day and Dad's Heart Condition." The silence in the garden was instantly shattered by the booming sound of the projection. The video feed was grainy but unmistakable. It was the footage I had recorded on my phone at the sports bar in Chicago. The timestamp in the corner of the screen read February 11th. 2 p.m. The exact moment I was walking across the stage to receive my diploma. On the screen, Richard and Linda were not lying in a hospital bed. They were jumping up and down in VIP seats, their faces painted blue and green, clinking beer bottles with Brad. A collective gasp swept through the crowd like a sudden wind. Neighbors turned to one another, whispering frantically. But before they could process the visual betrayal, the audio changed. The speakers blasted a crystal-clear recording of Linda's voice from the kitchen just 2 nights ago. "Your sister is stupid when it comes to family." Her voice sneered, distorted by the amplification but undeniably hers. "Just tell her I am proud, and she will vomit cash." Then came Richard's voice, booming over the manicured lawn. "That degree is just paper trash. I made more on the coin toss." The atmosphere in the garden shifted from confusion to absolute horror. Linda's face drained of all color, turning a sickly shade of gray. She let out a strangled cry and lunged toward the projector, her heels digging into the grass. Turn it off right now!" she shrieked, clawing at the air. She never made it. 2 large men I had hired from a private security firm stepped out from the shadows and blocked her path with impassive faces. She slammed into their chests and bounced back, looking around wildly as the guests recoiled from her. The screen shifted again. Now it displayed a series of high-resolution bank statements and credit reports. I had highlighted the relevant lines in neon yellow. Online casino, $10,000. Luxury car lease, $3,000. Louis Vuitton, $5,000. Beside these figures was the medical report from the hospital database, stamped with the words, "No cardiac event recorded." Then came the final nail in the coffin. A picture of Brad appeared, followed by the audio recording from the car ride. His voice was slurred and arrogant as he confessed to the hit-and-run accident and bragged about using their retirement fund to bribe the witness. I gripped the microphone, my knuckles white, and stared down at the people who had raised me. "My parents do not need money for heart surgery," I said, my voice cutting through the chaotic murmurs of the crowd. "They are not sick, they are addicts. They have spent every dime they have on gambling and maintaining a lie, and they tried to trick me into paying for it. I am not their daughter anymore. I am their bank account, and the bank is permanently closed." Richard's face twisted into a mask of pure, animalistic rage. The charming host vanished, replaced by a desperate, cornered man. "You ungrateful little witch," he roared, veins bulging in his neck. "You dare trap us after everything we did for you. Turn it off." He charged up the steps of the stage, his fist raised, intending to strike me down in front of everyone. I did not flinch. I did not move. I did not have to. From the front row, Marcus stepped forward with terrifying speed. He did not look like a guest anymore. He extended a leg, catching Richard mid-stride. My father tumbled forward, crashing hard onto the wooden planks of the stage at my feet. He scrambled to get up, but Marcus placed a polished leather shoe squarely on Richard's chest, pinning him down. "So," Marcus said, his voice low but loud enough for the first few rows to hear, "you do not have the money. Richard, you lied to me. You told me your rich daughter was paying your tab." The guests, realizing this was no longer a family dispute but something far more dangerous, began to flee. There were no polite goodbyes. Couples grabbed their coats and rushed toward the gates, averting their eyes from the disgrace unfolding on stage. Within moments, the garden was empty of everyone except the police, the loan sharks, and the ruins of the Vance family. Brad, the golden boy, was trembling violently. He backed away from the stage, trying to hide behind his mother, his eyes darting around looking for an escape route that did not exist. I looked down at my father, writhing under the boot of the man he owed money to, and I felt absolutely nothing. The blue and red strobe lights of the police cruisers flooded the manicured garden, turning the festive decorations into a grotesque carnival scene. The detectives from the fraud division, whom I had signaled earlier, swarmed the patio with a precision that contrasted sharply with the chaotic scattering of the terrified guests. "Richard Vance!" the lead detective shouted, stepping onto the stage where my father was still recovering from being pinned down. "You are under arrest for insurance fraud, wire fraud, and identity theft." Marcus stepped back, smoothing his suit jacket with a dark smirk, allowing the officers to haul my father to his feet. The cold, metallic click of handcuffs echoed through the sudden silence. Richard looked wild, his eyes darting from the officers to me, unable to comprehend that his authority had completely evaporated. "This is a mistake," Richard yelled, spitting saliva as he spoke. "My daughter. She is confused. Tell them. Olivia." I stood motionless, watching him with the detachment of a stranger. Across the lawn, 2 officers cornered Brad near the buffet table. He tried to bolt toward the side gate, but he was too drunk and too slow. They tackled him onto the grass, pressing his face into the dirt. "Bradley Vance, you are under arrest for felony hit-and-run and obstruction of justice," an officer announced, pulling Brad's arms behind his back. "We have a confession on tape." Mom, help me," Brad screamed, his voice cracking like a toddler's. "They are hurting me," but Linda could do nothing. She was standing in the middle of the ruined party, trembling as her world collapsed around her. She turned to me, mascara streaming down her face in black rivets. She lunged forward, grabbing my arm with a desperate, claw-like grip. "Olivia, please," she wailed, her voice shrill and breaking. "We are your family. I carried you for 9 months. I gave birth to you. How can you do this to your own flesh and blood? How can you be so cruel?" I looked down at her hand clutching my arm, feeling the revulsion rise in my throat. I gently but firmly peeled her fingers off me, one by one. "You have not looked at me as a daughter in years." "Mom," I said, my voice quiet and steady, cutting through her hysteria. "You only saw a retirement plan. You saw an ATM. Well, today I am locking the vault. The account is permanently closed." The police began to herd the remaining civilians out. A sergeant approached Marcus and his men. "The party is over, gentlemen," the sergeant said. "Clear out." Marcus nodded, unbothered. He walked past Richard, who was being shoved toward a patrol car. "The police can have you tonight." "Richard," Marcus hissed, leaning in close. "But I have your signature on the collateral agreement. This house belongs to me tomorrow morning. Enjoy prison." I reached into my clutch and pulled out the USB drive containing the encrypted backups of every financial crime my parents had committed over the last decade. I walked over to the police chief and placed it in his hand. "This drive contains the full forensic audit." I told him, my tone professional. "Bank transfers, email logs, the forged medical documents. It is all there. You have everything you need for a conviction." Richard, now shoved into the back of a cruiser, twisted his body to look at me through the open window. His face was a mask of pure, undistilled hatred. "I have no daughter," he screamed, his voice raw and scraping against his throat. "I disown you. Do you hear me? You are dead to us." I looked him in the eye and felt a weight lift off my shoulders, lighter than I had ever felt in my life. "That is the best thing you have ever done for me," I replied. The villa was now a crime scene. Officers were already beginning to tag the expensive furniture, the projector, and the piles of luxury gifts as evidence of proceeds from crime. The illusion of wealth was being dismantled piece by piece. I reached into my pocket and felt the cold metal of the spare key, the key to the house that I had used to sneak in, the key to a home that had never really been mine. I walked over to where Linda was sitting on the grass, weeping into her hands, entirely alone. I did not say a word. I simply dropped the key. It landed with a dull clink on the pavement right in front of her. I turned my back on the wailing woman, the handcuffed men, and the house that had been my prison. I walked down the long driveway toward the street, my heels clicking a steady rhythm on the asphalt, moving away from the wreckage and into the night. I walked out through the iron gates of the estate, the gravel crunching beneath my heels. Behind me, the cacophony of police sirens, the shouting of officers, and the hysterical sobbing of my mother faded into the distance. I did not run. I walked with the steady, measured pace of a woman who had just finished a long, exhausting shift and was finally clocking out. The cool night air of Seattle hit my face, but for the first time in my life, it did not feel cold. It felt clean. I slid into the driver's seat of my rental sedan and closed the door, sealing out the noise. My phone, which was sitting in the cup holder, began to vibrate violently. The screen lit up with names I had not heard from in years. Aunts who had ignored me at Christmas, cousins who only called when they needed money, and uncles who had always sided with my father. They were calling to scold me, to demand answers, or perhaps to beg for mercy on behalf of the family name. I picked up the phone. I did not answer it. Instead, I popped the case open and dug my fingernail under the SIM card tray. With a sharp snap, I pulled the small plastic chip out. I held it for a moment, looking at the golden contacts that linked me to a network of toxicity I had endured for 29 years. I rolled down the window and flicked the chip into the dark bushes along the roadside. The phone went dead silent. Before I put the car in drive, I pulled my iPad from my bag. I had one final transaction to make. I logged into my banking app and pulled up the $50,000 in savings that my parents had tried to steal. The money they claimed was for a heart surgery that never existed. I navigated to the donation page of the University of Chicago. I typed in the amount $50,000. In the memo line, I wrote, "For the invisible students who have to work 3 jobs to survive." I hit confirm. The money vanished from my account, but instead of buying my father a gambling chip or my brother a car part, it was going to save someone like the girl I used to be. I drove toward the airport, merging onto the highway. I kept my eyes fixed on the road ahead, refusing to check the rearview mirror. Seattle was shrinking behind me, becoming nothing more than a cluster of lights in the darkness. I felt no guilt. I felt no regret. When I arrived at the terminal, I saw it. On the large television screens hanging above the security checkpoint, the local news was breaking the story. The headline flashed in bold yellow letters, "Vance family scandal fraud, debt, and the Super Bowl charade exposed." They were showing the mugshot of my father, looking disheveled and angry, alongside a clip of the police escorting a weeping Linda out of the villa. People in the waiting area were shaking their heads, judging the greedy family on the screen. I watched for a second, feeling a strange sense of detachment. It was like watching a movie about strangers. I walked up to the airline counter. Usually, I would scour the internet for the cheapest economy seat, saving every penny to send home for emergencies that were always fabricated. Today, I did not look at the price. "I would like a ticket to Chicago," I told the agent. "First class, one way." The agent typed on her keyboard and smiled politely. "Heading out for a vacation. Or are you going home?" I looked at her, and a smile broke across my face. It was not the polite, practiced smile I had worn for years to hide my pain. It was genuine. It was radiant. "I am going home," I said, the words tasting sweet on my tongue. My own home. An hour later, the plane roared down the runway. As the wheels lifted off the tarmac, I felt the physical sensation of gravity fighting to hold me down, only to lose. We ascended through the cloud layer, breaking into the starlight above. Below me, trapped in the gray mist of Seattle, were the people who had tried to break me. They were now in a cage of their own making, while I was soaring above them. The flight attendant placed a crystal flute of champagne on my tray table. I picked it up, the bubbles dancing in the golden liquid. I closed my eyes and leaned my head back against the leather seat. The war was over. I was alone, but for the first time in 29 years, I was not lonely. I was free. I was no longer a victim. I was the victor of my own life. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please drop a comment below letting me know where you are tuning in from, as I would love to hear your thoughts and connect with you. Do not forget to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories. Like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people.